The council chambers of the Galactic Union had never seen a silence like this. Dozens of species from across the stars had gathered, their bodies strange and varied, their voices filled with nervous tension. There were winged creatures from the gas giants, crystal-skinned beings from icy moons, tentacled diplomats from ocean worlds, and insectoid strategists from desert planets. Yet amid all the usual chatter and debate, something was missing. The humans, usually a quiet but persistent presence, were gone. Not gone in anger, not gone in haste, just gone. Their seats in the council, usually filled with papers, data pads, and a small cup of steaming tea, always black, sat empty. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances. "Did they announce anything?" hissed Zorak, the spiny ambassador from Lithria. "Nothing," replied Torvin, a silver-scaled representative from Vexer. His voice trembled. One moment they were discussing trade tariffs, and the next, they're simply absent. The truth was simple, though no one realized it yet. Humans had made a choice. They had quietly decided that the council no longer served justice. For decades they had worked within the rules, followed the protocols, and tolerated the endless delays of bureaucracy. They had tolerated deceit, manipulation, and even small acts of corruption. They had waited for reform, for change, for accountability. But nothing significant had happened, and now humans were done waiting. On the outskirts of the council's central hub, a fleet of human starships drifted in silence. Ships that once carried diplomats, scientists, and traders had been withdrawn. Outposts on distant worlds were being dismantled carefully. Every piece of technology, every archive, every personal possession was methodically packed and moved to human-controlled space. There was no alarm, no fire, no anger, only quiet efficiency. Commander Alara Voss stood on the bridge of the starship Resolute. She was human, tall, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her voice, calm and measured, addressed her crew. "Make sure all data archives are secured," she said. "Double-check the encryption protocols. Leave nothing behind that could be misused, but ensure they can find the evidence if they look. Let them know the truth without us saying a word directly." Her crew nodded. Every member understood the plan. This was not an evacuation in panic. This was a statement that humans would no longer tolerate a council that acted against justice. Meanwhile, back in the council chamber, panic was growing. The absence of humans was more than a disruption. It was a challenge. No species had ever quietly walked away before. To most aliens, power and presence were everything. Influence meant being seen, being heard, being present. The humans' disappearance undermined the council's assumptions about control. "Should we send a retrieval team?" demanded Ambassador Threx, a six-limbed strategist from the volcanic world of Drakkara. "No," said Elder Solaris, the oldest member of the council. His voice echoed through the chamber, calm but firm. "Let them go. Let them leave. It is their choice. But make no mistake, they are leaving something behind. Humans always leave something behind." The council did not yet know what Solaris meant. Far from the hub of power on the human-controlled planet of Nova Prime, quiet celebrations were underway. People did not cheer loudly or make a spectacle. Instead, they worked with purpose. Scientists cataloged data. Archivists ensured nothing was lost. Engineers prepared ships for new missions. Families gathered, quietly sharing stories of the council's past failures, not with anger, but with clarity. Humans were leaving, but they were leaving lessons too. Dr. Anil Roy, a historian and one of the architects of the withdrawal plan, walked through the halls of the Nova Prime archives. He paused before a massive data terminal, scanning the information stored there. Every misdeed of the council, every hidden deal, every ethical compromise was documented. It was meticulous. It was undeniable. And it was designed not to shame, but to teach. "The council thinks we are gone quietly," Dr. Roy said to his assistant, Mira. "They don't realize that truth travels faster than any fleet. They will know eventually." And when they do, everything will change. Mira nodded, understanding. Do you think they will listen? They will have to, Roy replied. They have no choice. Humans do not act out of vengeance. We act out of principle. When the truth is laid bare, those who refuse to reform will face the consequences of their own making. Meanwhile, in the distant council chambers, small but significant changes were already beginning. Some younger delegates, curious about the humans' sudden departure, started digging through human communications. They found hints, subtle messages embedded in trade reports and diplomatic correspondences. Patterns emerged, strange annotations, that seemed trivial at first, but when decoded revealed years of careful observation, analysis, and moral judgment by humans. The council did not yet understand the scope. They only felt the tension, a quiet unease that grew with each passing day. Without humans present to mediate, to challenge, to demand integrity, the cracks in the council's authority began to show. On Nova Prime, Commander Voss reviewed the final list of human missions leaving Council territory. All ships are ready, she said. We leave at dawn, quietly, but firmly, and we leave the rest to them. Her words carried more weight than any battle cry. Humans did not need violence to make a point. Their very presence and now absence was enough to shift the balance. As the first light of Nova Prime's twin suns touched the fleet, the human ships rose silently from the planet's surface. There was no fanfare, no explosions, no dramatic speeches, only quiet, precise action. Fleet by fleet, ship by ship, humans left Council space, and everywhere they had been, they left behind a legacy that would not be ignored. Data archives, encrypted communications, subtle but undeniable evidence of the Council's moral failings. The Council, now empty of humans, convened in emergency session. Voices rose in panic, suspicion, and disbelief. And, how could they do this? Demanded Threx. They were part of the Council. They contributed to its decisions. They contributed to justice, not compromise, Silaris reminded them. And that is why they left. If the Council wishes to survive, it must reflect on what has been left behind. Humans do not act without reason. Their silence is louder than any speech. Their absence is heavier than any fleet. In distant corridors of Council worlds, rumors began to spread. Citizens whispered about the humans' quiet departure, about the strange calm with which they left, about the evidence that would soon emerge. In homes, schools, and marketplaces, beings of every kind speculated. If humans could walk away so peacefully yet with so much power, what did that say about the Council's authority? Back in human-controlled space, Commander Voss observed the final Council world fade from sensor range. She felt no triumph, no victory, only clarity. Humanity had acted according to its principles. The Council had been given the chance to act ethically, and they had been left with no excuses. Set course for the next sector, she said. Our work is not done. We will build, we will protect, and we will continue to guide through example, quietly but firmly. And so humans left, not in rage, not in fear, not in chaos, quietly, firmly. And in their wake, the Council was left to answer for its deeds. Little did the Council know, the humans' quiet departure was only the beginning. The next moves would test not just the Council's political skill, but its morality, its courage, and its ability to face the truth humans had left behind. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy paused, not in fear of war, but in wonder at what it meant to act with integrity, patience, and quiet strength. The Council had expected protests, petitions, and perhaps threats. What they had not expected was silence. A silence that spoke louder than any shout or battle cry. For weeks, delegates searched through human archives, communications, and trade, logs hoping for a clue, a sign of weakness, an opportunity to exploit. What they found instead was something far more dangerous: truth. On the icy world of Thrin, Ambassador Lixia paced before her holographic display. The human communication she had intercepted lay open before her. Streams of data, trade reports, diplomatic correspondences. At first, they seemed ordinary, but subtle patterns emerged, hidden annotations, timestamps that didn't match ordinary events. The humans had left breadcrumbs. "They are teaching us without speaking," Lixia whispered to her assistant, a small silver-furred creature named Miri. "Every note, every observation. It is deliberate. They want us to understand our failures." Miri tilted her head. "But why would they do this without confronting us directly?" "Because humans do not need confrontation to be heard," Lixia replied. "They know that truth, when discovered, has its own power." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the council members were in turmoil. Some tried to downplay the significance of what humans had left behind. Others panicked. Secrets that had been buried for decades, the misuse of resources, illegal conflicts, exploitation of weaker species, were suddenly at risk of being exposed. The humans had left evidence that could topple careers, ruin alliances, and force accountability on a scale the EI Council had never seen. On Nova Prime, Commander Alara Voss watched the unfolding chaos from the bridge of the Resolute. Her eyes scanned the holographic map of the galaxy, noting council worlds that were beginning to react. Humans had never interfered directly. They had no fleets attacking, no agents sabotaging systems. But the council's own members were unraveling. "Every system is beginning to question," Voss said quietly to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Kieran. "Every species is starting to notice the cracks, and all we did was leave the truth behind." Kieran nodded. "It's almost beautiful." "It is the power of integrity," Voss replied. "They cannot fight it, because it is not ours. It is theirs to confront. And when they do, they will either rise to it or crumble under it." Back in the council chambers, panic grew. Ambassador Threx of Drakkara demanded access to human records, hoping to manipulate or erase them. Elder Solaris, however, blocked him. "You do not understand," Solaris said, his voice calm but firm. "The humans did not leave this information for us to destroy. They left it so we could see ourselves clearly. Destroying it is not only futile, it is dishonorable, and that ultimately is the lesson humans teach." Across council worlds, whispers began to circulate. On markets, in schools, and on communication networks, ordinary citizens discussed the humans' departure. They spoke of discipline, patience, and foresight. The humans had been part of the council for centuries, quietly influencing decisions, quietly teaching through example. And now, in absence, they had left a legacy stronger than any speech or command. On Thrin, Lixia continued her investigation. Hours turned into days, days into weeks. She began to piece together a map of council misdeeds. Each act, minor or major, was documented in human logs. Illegal mining operations in uninhabited systems, unapproved weapons tests on neutral planets, covert manipulation of species alliances, trade agreements that secretly favored the powerful at the expense of the weak. Every instance carefully recorded, every detail verified. This is massive," Lixia muttered. "If this becomes public, the council cannot survive without change." "You believe they will change?" Miri asked, tilting her head. "They will have to," Lixia said. "Humans do not demand, they guide. And when guidance is unavoidable, leaders have no choice but to act." On Nova Prime, Dr. Anil Roy prepared another set of data for transmission. Not direct communication, but hints, signs, and encoded advice. The council did not know it yet, but the humans' departure had created a slow ripple effect. The ripple was not chaos, it was awareness. Every species, every world, every delegate would soon face a truth they could no longer ignore. In one of the smaller council chambers on the planet Vexor, a young historian named Arvin was the first to connect the dots. He had always admired humans for their ingenuity and patience. He had always respected their moral clarity. Now, examining the human archives, he realized the depth of their quiet influence. "They have been teaching us for centuries," he said, aloud, more to himself than to anyone else. "And now, they have given us the power to see ourselves as we truly are." The council began to fracture. Some members argued for secrecy, hoping to suppress the humans' records before ordinary citizens could learn the truth. Others demanded transparency, insisting that the council could survive only if it faced the consequences of its own actions. The debates were heated, passionate, and unprecedented. Meanwhile, on Nova Prime, humans did not celebrate. They continued their work quietly. Ships were repaired, outposts were maintained, and archives were secured. Humanity's focus was not revenge or dominance. Their goal was far simpler, yet far more powerful: to leave a legacy that could not be ignored, a mirror that showed the Council its true face. Commander Voss spoke with Dr. Roy in the archives. "Have we left enough?" she asked. "We have left exactly what is needed," Roy replied. "Not more, not less. The Council will have the information. It will be impossible for them to ignore it, but they must choose how to respond. Humans do not force change, they enable it. And if they refuse?" Voss asked. "Then they will face the consequences of their own actions," Roy said calmly. "Humans do not need to intervene directly. Principles have a way of enforcing themselves. Across the galaxy, ordinary citizens began to act on the humans' influence without even knowing it. On a desert world, a young trader refused to engage in corrupt deals. On a forested planet, a council worker exposed a secret bribe. On a floating city above a gas giant, a teacher insisted that students study ethics before politics. The humans' quiet example had already begun to reshape the behavior of countless beings. Back in the council, panic and reflection existed side by side. Delegates argued, debated, and investigated. Each day more evidence surfaced, more truths were uncovered, and more questions were asked. How had humans known so much? How had they predicted the council's actions? And most importantly, what did their absence mean for the future of the galaxy? On Nova Prime, Voss observed the galaxy's progress through the fleet's sensors. Every new report of reform, every new act of integrity was noted quietly in her logs. Humanity did not need to claim credit. Their goal had never been recognition. They had merely shown what was possible when courage, patience, and moral clarity guided action. "Do you think they will listen?" Kieran asked. "They will," Voss replied. "Humans do not shout. Humans do not force. They leave lessons behind. And when the galaxy is ready, it will learn them." As the days passed, it became clear that the Council had underestimated the humans. They had assumed that leaving the Council would weaken humanity's influence. In reality, it had strengthened it. The quiet withdrawal, coupled with carefully documented truths, had created a force the Council could not resist: the undeniable power of example. In council chambers, Elder Solaris addressed the assembly. "Humans left quietly," he said, "but in their absence, they have given us more than their presence ever could. They have left us a mirror. It is our choice whether we look, whether we act, and whether we change. Humans act not with fear, not with anger, but with principle. Let us hope we are wise enough to follow that example." For the first time in centuries, the Council was united, not by power, not by fear, but by the weight of truth. And somewhere beyond the Council's reach, humanity's fleet moved through the stars, carrying not weapons, not soldiers, but the quiet certainty that integrity, once sown, could not be ignored. The galaxy was beginning to wake up. And when it did, the humans' quiet legacy would shape its future in ways no council chamber could ever control. The council chambers had never been so chaotic. Alien delegates shouted over one another, wings flared, claws tapped, and voices echoed off the high ceilings. Yet, in the center of the turmoil, there was a growing sense of fear, quiet, deep, and unsettling. The humans were gone, and their quiet departure had left a storm in its wake. It started with small discoveries. On multiple planets, council workers found inconsistencies in their records. Trade deals that favored certain species were exposed. Bribes disguised as gifts came to light. Operations conducted in secret, which had been justified as strategic necessity, were revealed to be exploitative. These were not accusations from outsiders. They were documented facts. left by humans who had quietly observed for decades. Ambassador Threx of Drakara slammed his claws on the council table. "We cannot let this continue," he roared. "Humans may be gone, but their evidence is poisoning everything. We must suppress it." Elder Solaris raised his voice to calm the room. "Suppressing truth will only make it worse," he said. His calm demeanor contrasted with the rising panic around him. Humans left this evidence not as a weapon, but as a mirror. If we refuse to look, we will destroy ourselves. Across the chamber, Ambassador Lixia from Thrin leaned forward. Her eyes were sharp, reflecting a mix of fear and determination. "We cannot ignore this. If the galaxy learns of these misdeeds, the Council's authority will crumble. We must act, yes, but not with cover-ups. We must reform." Reform. The word echoed through the chamber like a bell in a silent cathedral. For centuries, the Council had tolerated compromise, manipulation, and political games. Reform was dangerous, unpredictable, and uncomfortable, but now, there was no choice. The humans had left a legacy that demanded it. On the planet Vexor, young, historian Arvin combed through human data archives for hours, piecing together timelines and records. Each entry painted a picture of the Council's failures, not in vague accusations, but in clear, undeniable detail. Misused resources, hidden conflicts, unfair trade practices, secret deals that harmed weaker species. All of it was carefully documented, verified, and organized. "This had been credible," Arvin said quietly, speaking to no one in particular. "The humans didn't just observe. They prepared us to see ourselves. And now, we have no excuses." Meanwhile, in Nova Prime, Commander Alara Voss monitored Council systems from her fleet. She watched as the first waves of unrest spread across Council worlds. Protests began in capital cities, not with violence but with questions. How could our leaders act this way? Why were we unaware of these truths? Citizens demanded answers, and the Council struggled to respond. Lieutenant Kieran glanced at her. "It's spreading faster than we thought. They're starting to listen to the evidence." "That is the point," Voss replied. "Humans don't force change. We show what is possible, and those who are willing follow. Those who are unwilling will fall behind." Back in the Council chamber, arguments became heated. Some delegates wanted to call for the immediate resignation of key leaders. Others argued for measured investigation. Each new piece of human evidence shifted the debate, revealing yet another layer of corruption or negligence. Ambassador Threx, desperate to regain control, slammed a datapad on the table. "This is slander, fabrication. Humans may be gone, but we can still control the narrative. Destroy these records. Erase their influence." "You cannot erase truth," Elder Solaris replied quietly but firmly. "Humans do not act recklessly. They left this knowledge as a challenge, not as a weapon. It is now up to us to answer it, or be answered by it." As the Council debated, ordinary citizens began to take action. On distant worlds, Council workers refused bribes and exposed hidden dealings. Merchants corrected trade imbalances. Teachers incorporated ethics and fairness into education for the first time in generations. Without direct human presence, the influence of their example spread naturally, quietly shaping behavior across the galaxy. On Thrin, Lixia and her assistant Miri worked with Arvin to consolidate the human archives into a comprehensible map of the Council's actions. They found evidence not only of corruption, but also of moments when the humans had tried to steer the Council toward integrity. Subtle suggestions in reports, ethical reminders hidden in technical notes, quiet opposition to immoral acts. "They were patient," Lixia said. "Centuries of patience, and now they leave us with no choice but to face ourselves." "Do you think the Council will survive this?" Miri asked. "They must," Lixia replied. "Not because they want to, but because they have no alternative. Humanity left them a path to reform. It is up to the Council to follow it." Meanwhile, across the stars, humans moved silently. Ships transported supplies, outposts maintained critical infrastructure, and fleets patrolled borders, but they did not intervene in the Council's affairs. Their goal was not control. Their goal was principle. The humans' absence was their presence, proof that morality, patience, and foresight could influence more than fleets or weapons ever could. Commander Voss spoke to her crew during a quiet moment on the bridge of the Resolute. "Do you see?" she asked. "We do not strike, we do not demand, and yet the galaxy changes because of our example. This is our strength. Quiet, principled action is more powerful than any attack." Lieutenant Kieran smiled. "And the Council? They have no idea what hit them." "Exactly," Voss replied. "And they will learn, in time, that truth has consequences even when presented quietly." Back in the council chamber, cracks began to show in alliances. Delegates who had once supported unethical practices now argued for transparency. Others resisted, attempting to maintain power through manipulation. The tension reached a peak when Arvin presented a detailed account of human archives in the main council chamber, showing clear evidence of misdeeds, hidden deals, and ignored responsibilities. The room fell silent. Every delegate stared at the holographic projections, unable to argue with the clarity of the evidence. The humans had left no opinion, no judgment, only facts. And facts, when undeniable, demanded response. Elder Solaris finally spoke. "The humans have left us not with anger, not with threats, but with clarity. It is up to us to act with the same principle they demonstrated. The question before us is simple. Will we continue as before, or will we change?" Some delegates nodded, understanding at last that reform was not optional. Others shifted uncomfortably, realizing that resistance would not erase the evidence nor the influence of human example. Across council worlds, reform began in small, significant ways. Bribes were refused, illegal operations were halted. Secret deals were revealed and corrected. Citizens learned to question authority and demand accountability. Without humans present, integrity became contagious. On Nova Prime, Commander Voss observed it all. Her eyes reflected the starlight as she spoke quietly to Dr. Roy. "They are beginning to understand," she said. "The Council is finally learning what we always knew. Influence is not about power. It is about principle." Dr. Roy nodded. "And when they fail to follow principle, consequences will follow, as naturally as the stars orbit their suns." Indeed, the galaxy had begun to change. The humans' quiet withdrawal had forced the Council to confront its own actions. Divisions within the Council exposed weaknesses, but also created opportunities for reform. Ordinary citizens, inspired by the example humans had left behind, began to act ethically, independently of any orders. Even now, humans continued their work quietly, expanding exploration, protecting vulnerable systems, and building a future guided by moral clarity. They had left the Council to answer for its deeds, and the Council would do so, whether willingly or not. In the Council chambers, Threx's voice was drowned out by the quiet weight of truth. Secrets exposed, actions documented, and principles revealed. Nothing could erase the humans' influence. The Council faced its greatest crisis yet, not from war, not from rebellion, but from understanding. Arvin looked around the chamber, finally seeing what humans had always shown. Courage and integrity were stronger than fear and power. "They left quietly," he whispered, "but their presence is everywhere, and now it is our turn to answer." And so the Council's crisis deepened, not with chaos but with awakening. The humans had shown that influence was not about fleets or weapons, but about leaving a legacy of truth, integrity, and moral courage. The Council could fight it, ignore it, or reform, but nothing could erase it. Across the galaxy, stars shimmered as if in acknowledgement. Humanity had left, but its example illuminated the path forward. The Council's choices would define the future, but the lesson of humans, quiet, principled, unyielding, would remain, guiding the galaxy toward a new dawn. The galaxy was no longer calm. On several Council worlds, unrest had begun to spread. Ordinary citizens, fueled by the evidence humans had left behind, questioned their leaders. Protests were rising, not violent, but insistent. They demanded honesty, fairness, and accountability. The Council, once confident in its control, found itself teetering on the edge of chaos. In the central chamber of the Council's main world, delegates argued over the future of the galaxy. Ambassador Threx, desperate to maintain control, slammed a clawed hand on the table. "We cannot yield to the chaos humans have left in their wake," he shouted. "We must regain control. We must enforce our authority." Elder Solaris, calm as ever, shook his head. "Control is no longer the question," he said. "Humans left us a lesson. Authority without integrity is meaningless. You cannot command respect with fear alone. Only truth, honesty, and courage earn it." Across the chamber, Lixia stood, her wings trembling slightly with anger and hope. "Do you not see?" she said, her voice echoing. "Humans acted quietly. They left no armies, no weapons, no threats. And yet they have made the Council's corruption impossible to ignore. If we act wisely, we can still repair the damage. If we act wrongly, we will lose everything." Outside the Council walls, on cities across Council worlds, ordinary citizens were taking matters into their own hands. A teacher in a forested city stopped accepting bribes for school admissions. A merchant on a desert world refused to engage in unfair trade. On an ocean planet, workers exposed hidden agreements that exploited smaller species. The humans' example had ignited a spark, and now it was spreading. On Nova Prime, Commander Ilara Voss observed the unfolding events through the fleet's sensors. She stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her gaze steady as she watched the Council struggle. "They are learning," she said quietly to Lieutenant Kieran. "The Council is beginning to understand what humans have always known. Morality matters, more than power." Kieran nodded. "But some of them resist. Threx is still fighting against change." "He always will," Voss replied. "That is why the humans left him a choice. He will act with principle or fail. Humanity does not force change. It gives the galaxy the chance to choose it." Back on the Council world, the unrest escalated. Delegates argued late into the night, struggling to find a way forward. Some proposed strict reforms, transparency, and accountability. Others plotted to suppress the evidence or manipulate public perception. The Council's unity was crumbling, and for the first time, fear and uncertainty replaced arrogance and control. Amid the chaos, young historian Arvin stepped forward. With the human archives as his guide, he presented a plan. It was bold and simple: transparency. Every hidden deal, every questionable action, every secret operation documented by humans would be made available to the public. Citizens would see the truth. Leaders would have no choice but to act ethically or face collapse. The chamber fell silent. No delegate had expected such a proposal. Some whispered about its danger. Others, particularly the younger members, recognized its necessity. Elder Solaris finally spoke. "Arvin is correct. Humans left us the tools to see our own failures. If we act with courage, we can correct them. If we act out of fear or greed, we will be remembered as those who ignored truth." Meanwhile, on Council worlds, small rebellions were forming. Not armed rebellions, but organized movements demanding change. Citizens refused to cooperate with unethical leaders. Workers exposed hidden deals. Scholars and educators insisted on truth and transparency. The humans' quiet withdrawal had sown a network of moral clarity across the galaxy. On Nova Prime, Voss and Dr. Roy watched the ripple effects grow. "They are acting," Dr. Roy said. "The Council is finally responding to our influence without us interfering directly." "Yes," Voss replied. "And notice this. They are not imitating humans. They are learning from humans. They are discovering the power of principle on their own. That is the true lesson." As the Council deliberated, news arrived from the outer systems. A rebellion was brewing on a key trade world. Citizens demanded transparency and ethical governance. They were not armed, but their organization was formidable. Without human intervention, they had adopted humans' principles: patience, intelligence, and moral clarity. Ambassador Threx panicked. "This is out of control. We cannot allow these rebellions to succeed." Elder Solaris shook his head. Control is no longer the point. Humans taught us that leadership is not about enforcing obedience. It is about setting an example. If we fail to follow that example, we fail entirely. On the streets of the trade world, citizens gathered peacefully, holding signs and chanting for truth. They were not violent. They demanded accountability. Leaders realized that resistance would only make matters worse. The humans had shown the power of principle without force, and the citizens were acting the same way. Back in the council chamber, debates reached a turning point. A vote was called. For the first time in centuries, the council voted to implement full transparency, to expose all hidden agreements, and to allow citizens to hold leaders accountable. The chamber erupted in arguments, but the motion passed. Across the galaxy, news spread rapidly. Citizens rejoiced, and leaders who had resisted were forced to acknowledge the truth. The council, shaken but alive, began to reform. The humans' lesson had been clear. Leadership required integrity, courage, and moral clarity. On Nova Prime, Commander Voss observed quietly. She did not celebrate. Humanity's work was far from complete, but she allowed herself a small nod. "They have begun to understand," she said. Dr. Roy smiled faintly. "Yes. The Council is learning that principle carries power greater than fleets or weapons. That is humanity's strength." Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its mission through the stars. Outposts were maintained, supplies delivered, and exploration continued. Humans did not intervene directly, but they guided subtly, leaving paths of wisdom and principle wherever they traveled. In council chambers, the reforms began to take effect. Leaders who had resisted were exposed. Secret deals were made public. Corruption was addressed. Citizens began participating in governance actively, inspired by humans' quiet example. The galaxy was learning to act with courage, integrity, and patience. Even Ambassador Threx, stubborn as ever, was forced to acknowledge the change. His claws trembled as he reviewed the evidence of human influence. "They left quietly," he muttered to himself. "And yet they have reshaped everything." Young historian Arvin stood in the council chamber, reflecting on the transformation. "Humans did not fight us," he said softly. "They did not demand or threaten. They showed us what was right, and now we must act on it, or fail entirely." The council, humbled and forced to confront its failures, began the slow work of rebuilding trust. Ordinary citizens continued to influence events, guided by the example humans had left behind. The galaxy, once complacent and corrupt, was awakening to the power of principle and morality. Commander Voss and her fleet moved silently through the void, observing the ripple effects. Humanity had left, but its presence remained stronger than ever. "They are learning," Voss said to Kieran. "The Council faces the truth. They will have to act. That is the power of integrity. That is the power of humanity." Kieran nodded, "And the galaxy will never forget it." Indeed, the galaxy had changed. Quietly, patiently, and with moral clarity, humans had shown the way. The Council had been forced to confront its failures, citizens had been inspired to act ethically, and leaders had been reminded that power without principle was meaningless. And somewhere in the endless void, humanity continued its journey, a silent reminder that the greatest strength in the universe was not in fleets or weapons, but in courage, patience, and the quiet power of doing what is right. The Council, humbled and awakened, had finally begun to learn the lessons humans had left behind. But the true test remained. Could they uphold these principles in the face of future challenges? The answer would determine the future of the galaxy, and whether humanity's quiet legacy would endure. The galaxy was waking. For the first time in centuries, council worlds were beginning to operate openly, honestly, and with accountability. The humans were gone, but their influence lingered like sunlight after dawn, illuminating truths that had been hidden for too long. On the main council world, Elder Silara stood before a crowded chamber. Delegates from dozens of species listened intently, the weight of the human's legacy hanging over every word. Change is never easy, Solaris said. But the absence of humans has shown us the consequences of failing to act with integrity. Today, we begin the work of rebuilding not only trust but honor. The lessons they left us are simple. Leadership is measured not by fear or power, but by principle, courage, and fairness. Across the galaxy, the first acts of reform were already visible. On Vexer, citizens now had access to public records that had been hidden for decades. On Thrin, trade agreements were reviewed openly, ensuring that no species was unfairly favored. On Drakara, corrupt officials were replaced with those who demonstrated ethical leadership. Slowly, carefully, the galaxy was healing. In the capital of a key trade world, a young teacher named Lyra stood before her classroom. She had once doubted humans, believing them distant and insignificant. Now she spoke with conviction. "The humans taught us without speaking," she told her students. "They showed us that courage and honesty matter more than power. Even in their absence, they guide us. We are the ones who must carry forward what they began." Her students nodded, inspired. Across council worlds, similar lessons were being taught. The humans' example had sparked a network of ethical behavior, a moral awakening that reached far beyond the council's chambers. On Nova Prime, Commander Alara Voss watched the galaxy through the fleet's sensors. Ships were moving peacefully between star systems. Communications networks buzzed with discussions of ethics, fairness, and accountability. Humans had withdrawn from direct involvement, yet they were shaping the future in ways no weapons or fleets ever could. "They are learning," Voss said quietly to Lieutenant Kieran. "The Council, the citizens, the leaders, they are beginning to understand what humanity represents. Principle matters more than power, courage more than fear, integrity more than manipulation." Kieran smiled. "And the galaxy is better for it." "Yes," Voss replied. "But the work is never done. Humanity's strength lies not in domination, but in example. We guide, we protect, we inspire, silently, patiently, consistently." Meanwhile, back in the council chambers, Ambassador Threk sat quietly reflecting on the past months. He had fought against transparency and reform, resisted the humans' quiet influence, and now he saw the consequences of his resistance. The galaxy was changing despite him. He realized that humans had achieved more in absence than he ever could, with power. "They left quietly," Threx muttered to himself, "and yet their presence is everywhere." On a distant ocean world, the council's youngest members were taking bold steps. They established councils for citizens to participate in governance directly. They implemented programs for ethical training and decision-making. These initiatives were inspired by the human's example, simple principles applied consistently, leading to profound change. Young historian Arvin continued his work as well. With the human archives as his guide, he documented the reforms, the successes, and the challenges. He understood that the human's departure had not ended influence. It had amplified it. By showing what was possible, humanity had sparked a movement of moral clarity that could not be contained. On Nova Prime, Dr. Anil Roy walked through the halls of the main archive, reflecting on humanity's achievements. "They taught without commanding," he said softly. "They left without confrontation, and yet their absence has shaped the galaxy more than any council or war could. That is the power of principle." Commander Voss nodded. "And it will continue. Humanity's example is permanent. The council may change, citizens may rise and fall, but the legacy of integrity, courage, and moral clarity will endure." Across the galaxy, ordinary beings flourished. Traders conducted business fairly. Educators taught ethics alongside science. Scientists collaborated openly across species. Families raised children to question, to think critically, and to act with principle. The human's quiet departure had created a galaxy where ethical action became contagious. Even the council, once rigid and self-serving, began to embody these lessons. Leaders now debated not only what was politically advantageous, but what was morally right. Decisions were weighed, against principle and fairness. The council had begun to evolve, guided not by humans' presence, but by the example they had left behind. On the edge of known space, the human fleet traveled silently. Ships glided between stars, exploring new systems, protecting vulnerable colonies, and maintaining trade and communication networks. Humanity's mission was clear: to thrive, to protect, and to guide through principle, not dominance. Commander Voss stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking out into the endless stars. "We have done our part," she said. "The galaxy has learned to see itself. The Council will continue to struggle, to challenge, to grow, and we will continue to lead, quietly, ethically, patiently. Humanity does not demand. Humanity shows the way." Lieutenant Kieran looked at her. "Do you think they understand fully?" "They will," Voss replied. "It takes time for principles to take root. But humanity's legacy is not measured in days or months. It is measured across centuries. We have planted the seed. The galaxy will grow from it." On a bustling trade world, citizens celebrated not with war or violence, but with recognition of progress. They knew the Council had made mistakes, but they also recognized the steps toward reform. Ethical practices became standard. Accountability became expected. The humans' example had created a culture of responsibility that could not be ignored. Even Ambassador Threx, once stubborn and resistant, began to adapt. He realized that leadership without integrity was meaningless, and that true influence came from example, not fear. Slowly, he began to mentor younger delegates, teaching them to act with fairness, inspired by the humans' enduring principles. Back on Nova Prime, Commander Voss received a communication from a young council historian on Thrin. "We are beginning to understand," the historian said. "Your absence has taught us more than your presence ever could. Humanity is shaping the galaxy quietly but powerfully. We are grateful." Voss smiled. "That is all we ever wanted. Guide, protect, inspire. Nothing more, nothing less." "Doctor," Roy joined her on the bridge. "It is remarkable," he said. "They left quietly, and yet the galaxy will never be the same. That is the essence of humanity's strength." "Yes," Voss agreed. "And as long as we remain guided by principle, the galaxy will continue to grow stronger. Not because of power, not because of conquest, but because of example. Because doing what is right matters more than winning." Across the stars, humanity thrived. Planets flourished under ethical governance. Citizens learned the value of principle and moral clarity. Leaders were tested, but guided by the human example, they began to act with integrity. The Council, humbled and awakened, was slowly becoming the institution it was meant to be. Not through force, but through guidance and example. And somewhere, in the quiet vastness of space, humanity's fleet moved steadily forward, leaving behind a galaxy transformed. Not through conquest, not through threat, not through dominance, but through patience, courage, and principle. The humans had left quietly, but their legacy endured everywhere. The Council had been forced to answer for its deeds. Citizens had learned to act ethically. Leaders had been reminded of the power of integrity, and the galaxy at last began a new dawn, one guided not by fear or control, but by humanity's quiet, unyielding example. For in the end, it was not fleets or armies that shaped the galaxy. It was the strength of character, the courage to act rightly, and the patience to wait for change that made humans the most influential force in the stars. The Council, the citizens, and even the rebels understood this now. Humanity had proven that true power was not measured by dominance or fear, but by principle. And in leaving quietly, humans had reshaped the galaxy forever. The stars shone brighter that day, as if in recognition of what had been achieved. A new dawn had arrived,